Hi, everybody. It's Ryan from Pie Records, and I'm here with Evan from the Boss Martians, the Sonics,
Oh,
and No Count Records. How are you, Evan?
I'm good.
So,
Doing good. Yep, doing all good.
I've been listening to the Boss Martians the last couple of days, and some really older stuff from the '90s, and then some more current stuff from the 2000s. I noticed there's a bit
Cool.
a bit of a difference. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, definitely. And Ryan, thank you for listening. I We appreciate that. Well, when the Martians started, I think our first show, February 1992. When we first started, we started as kind of like a surf and garage rock band, and kind of like had the surf like '60s frat rock, garage thing. We were like never like a super like tough guy garage band, but and it always leaned more heavily on the surf side. um but loved bands like the Astronauts, Trashmen, and of course we love Dick Dale. Got a chance to play with him in the '90s, which was a lot of fun, really cool. But we did that for a number of years, and then right around 2001, and Art from Music Records actually was managing the band. I kind of had a idea that I wanted to change the format a little bit, and I wasn't sure if should we keep the name, should we not keep the name, and Art was like, I think we should keep the name, and just go with it. So yeah, we kind of had like a little bit of a format shift, stylistic shift, if you will, which leaned pretty heavily on a lot of the other records that I absolutely loved, influenced by like Elvis Costello and the Attractions, like early Elvis and the Attractions. I absolutely just love those records so
I could
much,
totally hear
and
that.
they've always been like a yeah, I mean, always been like a really huge influence on my writing and the stuff I was into. Nick Lowe, a lot of the Stiff Records bands, and just obviously bands like the Sonics were a huge influence, and that was kind of incorporated into the to that second era of the band, if you will. Era, I don't know if that's the right word, but once we changed the style and kind of shifted the format a little bit. So the Attractions, Nick Lowe, Stiff Records, I mean the Buzzcocks, stuff like that. A lot of influence, and then also actually, man, some Small Faces, stuff like that. I mean, I love those records as much as I love the surf and garage rock stuff. So when you just kind of feel the need that you feel like a need that you need to explore some new stuff and just kind of keep yourself fresh, we did that. And that was around like 2000. Like 2002 was the first record that came out. It was on Music Recordings. My One of my best friends, Art Borso, and he fully supported it. He was great. I mean, Art was awesome. So yeah, 2002 was the first record that we kind of did that was outside of the surf and frat rock, garage rock kind of format, and that was called Making the Rounds. And then from 2002 to about 2010, we were on the road like nonstop. We
Wow.
toured, the States, the States, played up in Canada, Europe. I don't know how many times, so it was just like nonstop on the road supporting the records from, 2002 to 2010. We did a single with Iggy Pop. That was really cool for me. I mean, I couldn't
Wow,
actually
yeah.
believe that it was happening while I was actually recording his vocal. I was just sitting there kind of like in amazement. But yeah, so from that time period, about 8-9 years, it was power pop, rock and roll, that kind of stuff. And then band took a little bit of time off, 2011, and then we kind of rebooted in 2012, and that was like for one show actually. We played the I think it was like the 20, it was a 20th anniversary. The owner of the Double Down Saloon in Las Vegas got us to get back together for one show to play the 20th, and we did that. That was great. And then took about another 2 years off, and 2014 we kind of rebooted in the original format, the surf, frat rock, garage stuff. And we have been really busy since, I mean, back to Europe, both coasts here in the States. And then, of course, the COVID thing hit. So, that
Yeah.
pretty much put the pause on touring for everybody. So, and here we are. Here I sit talking to you.
Oh, that's quite a journey. Um,
It's quite a journey.
so some of those 2000s records, tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like early 80s inspired the punk rock scene in LA. Would you say Adolescence, Agent Orange, stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. One of my favorite bands, I mean, from the time I was like, I don't know, 13, 14, when I was, I was actually living in Southern California at that time. It was right before we moved up here to the Northwest. Um, X was always one of my favorite bands, from the
Yeah.
whole slash record scene in LA, LA scene, X, Black Flag, love those bands. So yeah, Billy Zoom, gotta love his playing, man.
Awesome. Awesome. So why don't you tell me the story behind the Sonics and how you wound up playing guitar for them?
Yeah, well, lifelong fan of the band, absolutely. And it was kind of like uh, right out of the blue. I was asked to fill in for a date for Larry Paripa, who is pretty much, he's the one and only Sonics guitar player. But the Sonics had been touring a lot. They were touring like as hard or harder than the Martians were like touring, when we were like in full phase. So I was asked to fill in for a date in Santiago, Chile in January of 2016, if I remember correctly. And so we did that. And that was just, I mean, I was completely blown away. There's no two ways about it. Being asked to play guitar in the Sonics for a show, for a date, was incredible. So, we did that and it went great. And everybody, I got along with the guys really well. But that being said, I knew the guys from the Martians, having supported them, both in Europe and the States. So, we already had friendships going. There was already like a great relationship with, between the Martians and the Sonics and stuff like that. So, yeah, we got along great, and I already knew everybody. The drummer, Dusty Watson, who's one of my. Oh, you'll probably hear my dog barking in the background there, so apologies because I'm here in my home studio. But yeah, Dusty. I mean, those guys. Jake, the organ player. I mean, they're like family to me. I mean, really, those guys are like truly like. Everybody use the word like brother a lot, but Jake, Dusty, Rob, Freddie Dennis was playing bass at the time. I mean, Jake and I have known each other since we were kids, so I mean that was super cool for me because Jake and I had always talked about maybe playing or doing something together. So that was super cool. And then, like I said, Dusty Watson on drums, man. I mean, one of my favorite drummers of all time to watch and to listen to records that he's made. And then, uh, he and I had been recording, doing session stuff together for years before that, actually. I mean, going back to like, I don't know, 2003 or four, something like that. So yeah, I mean, everybody knew each other, everybody got along. So there was like a great, working kind of, I don't know, chemistry or whatever. And then we did the show in Santiago, went great. Played with another great band from the Northwest, Dandy Warhols. They were terrific. And so basically, I think that Larry had reached a point where he wasn't interested in touring as much, or he just didn't want to hit the road so hard. So the guys asked me if I'd continue to, fill in for Larry and play guitar. And I mean, it's like I said, I mean, the Sonics have one guitar player, that's Larry Paripa. But I said yes, because I love the guys. And I mean, it's an honor to play with Rob Lind, man. Anytime I get a chance to take the stage with Rob, it's just, it's an honor. I just love those guys. So I said yes. And here we are, to current date. Now, I mean, the band hasn't toured since I think it was 2018. Rob wanted to take 2019 off from touring. which we did. And we had about a month and a half that was booked for 2020, which was like late March through early May. And then obviously, the pandemic hit. So I
Yeah,
am really, really glad that we didn't start that tour in the midst of a pandemic, kind of breaking loose. And,
yeah,
I mean, this thing was so crazy and there was so much misinformation and it's just been so wild that, who knows how
yeah.
long we would have been stuck over there.
Oh my
But
God.
yeah, pretty crazy timing. But so anyway, pandemic hits, and of course the tour is canceled. So I haven't heard the latest on anything really, but hopefully, maybe we'll make up some of the tour dates. I think the last that I heard, I think that was the idea, that was a plan. So
Awesome.
hopefully the Sonics will make it back out.
Being being in two bands that heavily tour, when able to, how do you juggle that? I mean, that's how do you juggle the two bands?
Um, you just do the best that you can with scheduling. Uh, the Sonics tour more often and you know a lot more heavily than the Martians have been touring in the past few years. But the Martians, when we go out, it'll be like you know maybe like there's a date in Europe, and that's kind of like a festival or an anchor date or something like that. And then we'll with one of the booking agents that we work with, we'll try and do like maybe a week around that, for some supplemental shows. Um, it's kind of been the same in the States. Some of the really wild garage rock festivals that we've played, and some of the surf festivals, as you call them, that we've played too, like there's some great stuff. There's like SG 101, which is Jeff Hansen, aka Big Tiki Dude. He puts on a big surf extravaganza down there in Southern California. Then you've got Vincent at High Tide Records, who does the High Tide Summer Holiday. And that's out in Asbury Park. So we played that. We played both in 2019, and they were both great. It's a total pleasure to be there. So, and we do supplemental dates around that. So maybe a week and a half around those. So that was kind of the Martians touring structure. Whereas the Sonics, for example, like with this last European tour that was canceled / postponed with the whole pandemic thing, the Sonics will go out for like 2 months or like a month and a half. And, you are on the bus. So, a lot of hitting it pretty hard. Those guys are road dogs, man, touring machines. So that's kind of the I guess the difference between the two. So you just do the best that you can with scheduling.
Awesome. That's always blows my mind when, especially with drummers, how they talk about being in multiple bands at the same time. Like some drummers are in 5 bands at the same time, and you're kind of like,
Oh yeah.
how do they juggle that? But they always manage to get the job done.
Yeah. Actually, perfect example, case in point. Dusty Watson, Dusty plays in everybody's bands. He is a working drummer and a machine. And I've seen that guy power through some Sonics tours coming right off of foot surgery, where he's actually had to use his other kick pedal foot. Like instead of his right foot, he'll be using his
Yeah.
left foot on, like on like a double kick pedal setup, to play the kick. So yeah, I mean, drummers, you got to have the respect. Those guys are physically pounding it really hard. But yeah, I know drummers, lots of gigs, man, really.
I imagine, even as a guitarist who plays in multiple bands, once you kind of have that rhythm going where you can step in from one band to another, it kind of it's something that you kind of can get conditioned to.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. I mean, you kind of get, you get familiar with it. It's kind of like that. It's just kind of like that touring mindset. You get into it. And every band has a different band dynamic too. So it's not just like, if you're being hired to play in somebody's band, it's not just like, like playing the songs. Every band has a different way that they operate. So there's, psychology, involved as well. So you kind of have to understand what their workflow is. So like, for example, with the Sonics, when I was asked to fill in and then, join the band, it's like there's some definitely a Sonics workflow and a Sonics dynamic and it's funny because, in the Sonics, I'm known as the quiet one, which anybody that knows me would laugh at that. But with the Sonics, I just hang back and, get in line and just, put your head down and work. But it's, yeah, so there's the learning the music part, and as a touring guitar player, you always want to do your best for whoever you're playing with. But yeah, that psychology side, you need to learn how each band kind of operates, so it can be, it can be a little overwhelming, but hey, I'm grateful for the work, when I get it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Before I
Yeah.
go any further and I forget, I want to ask you, how was Iggy Pop to work with?
Um, it was amazing. I, I don't know how it could have been any better. Because there's always the whole, hey, watch out when you meet your idols kind of,
Yeah.
thing. Like, you wouldn't want to meet somebody that you absolutely admire and have loved for decades and have them be not cool.
Yeah.
Iggy was great. Iggy was great. And it was interesting how that kind of went down. Iggy and I were connected through my manager at the time, the Martians manager at the time, Art Borisseau, through his connects and some people at BMG that handle Iggy's back catalog. Art essentially, connected that one and, set it up so that they said, hey, we'd like to have Evan write with Iggy or something like that. It was a while ago, like 2000, it was like 2007, 2008. So I was like, hey, would you like to do that sometime? And I'm like, it's Iggy Pop. Of course I'd like to do that. So it was kind of funny. One morning I just got an email, and it was an email from Iggy's personal assistant at the time. And who knows, he still might be with Iggy, I'm not sure. But the email was something to the nature of, Iggy does not do email, computers. He even hates fax machines. So, my name is, the personal assistant's name. And he's like, here are some lyrics that Iggy had me transcribe for you. So I got this email, and here were these like wild lyrics written by Iggy Pop. And then it was kind of like, the ball was in my court to like write the backing track, to write the music. So, I wrote the tune for it. Yeah. Which was
Interesting way
cool.
to do it.
It's pretty interesting. So basically, I wrote the track, and I sent it to Iggy, and he loved it. It was great. It was really cool. So then Art had the idea, because at first it was just going to be a writing collaboration. So then Art had the idea that hey, maybe we can get Iggy to do like a guest vocal, like do kind of a little duet thing on this. And I was like, that would be wild. And I was actually on tour in Europe at the time that Art had suggested that. And so Art worked on that while I was out with the Martians. I got back to the States, and he said, yeah, it's on. We can do it. So I actually got on the phone with Iggy, and Iggy's like, hey, how do you want to do this? Do you want me to come out there, or do you want to come out here? They've got studios that we can do it out here. And Iggy's big thing was he just didn't want to have to get on a plane and deal with all the, I was like, no problem. And for all intents and purposes, I got the idea that to make it as convenient for him as possible would be a good thing.
Yep.
So I basically took like a, I don't know, like an 8-space rack unit, and I put together like a little touring recording rig. Got a laptop, Pro Tools going. So I actually I flew out to Miami, and I went to one of his houses there in Miami. I set up a mobile rig, and we cut the vocal right there. He did it like in a little dining room area. And in classic, and like I said, Iggy arrived, I got there hours early, and Iggy's assistant, let me in and, made sure that I had everything I need to get set up. So I got set up and got the rig going. And like I said, I was like extra early, but Iggy showed up right on time and, made a few minutes of small talk, gave each other a hug, that kind of thing. It was great. And Iggy proceeded to take his shirt off, went right up to the mic stand, walked right up to the mic, put the cans on, put the headphones on, and was like, let's do it. So we had the vocal in like 2 takes. I think it was 2 takes. I maybe comped a couple of things, but 2 takes and he was done, and that was it. And
Wow.
yeah. So it was one of those things where, as I was packing up and getting ready to go, made a little more small talk, then loaded my car, my rental car, down there in Miami, and um, as I was driving away, I was just like, wow, you know, not only did I just you know, record Iggy's vocal, but I mean, the Martians have an Iggy duet, co-write and vocal on one of our tracks. So that was, pretty crazy. It was cool. I still kind of get like, not nervous, but goosebumps when I think about it. But
Yeah,
anyway, it was
totally.
great. It was really good. So a lot of people worked on that to make it happen, but it was worth it. Definitely one of those things you'll never forget. So that was cool.
It's
Beyond cool.
a rad tune.
Thank you. Thank you. It's pretty wild. I mean, it's pretty, those lyrics were, I think those lyrics were so far out that we actually needed Iggy to get on that track.
Yeah, I would say, yeah.
Yeah.
What so you do a lot of traveling. You work with Iggy, you work with the Martians, you work with the Sonics. How do you get time for a label? No Count Records.
So the No Count story, that's kind of like almost like born out of necessity, because I am also in a third band. There are 3 primary bands that I'm in: Sonics, Boss Martians, and my brother and I have a band called Dirty Sidewalks. It's actually my brother's band, and then he asked me to get in, play guitar, sing harmonies, and stuff like that. So Dirty Sidewalks was kind of at the root of the creation of No Count Records. We made a record, and I just didn't want to do the whole, hey, let me pitch my record to 20 different labels and, grovel for a record deal kind of thing. So we just kind of decided to, put our own record out. So that's kind of the No Count story. It's my brother and I. And coincidentally, my brother's also in the Boss Martians with me as well. He plays the Fender Bass 6 in the Martians, but in Dirty Sidewalks, he plays, he plays guitar and sings lead. I sing backing and harmony vocals, and do maybe a little more of the lead guitar, I guess. But yeah, so like I said, the No Count story just kind of born out of necessity.
Is there
Which we put out 2. So we've got 2 Sidewalks records out. So anybody watching, please buy them.
the Dirty Sidewalks? Tell me a little bit about that band I have not heard. Tell me about what that sounds like.
Okay, so the Sidewalks, it's kind of like, I guess you could say it is equally informed by stuff like Echo and the Bunnymen, Jesus and Mary Chain. A little Oasis is kind of crept in there. My brother loves Oasis. I went to see them in the 90s. I love Oasis too, I guess. But also like a lot of 60s influences. We actually recorded and released a Trogs cover.
Oh wow.
Just this past fall. So yeah, we did With a Girl Like You. So I guess it's like really like UK influenced, and
Okay.
and equally informed by 80s, 90s as much as it is by like 60s. We love the Beach Boys, so we, and stuff like the Everly Brothers. As far as like aesthetically, tonally, it's not that kind of sound. We're on the heavier side, like I said, Mary Chain style. But Swerve Driver, it's one of my brother's favorite bands. And my brother's name is Eric Foster, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, Swerve Driver, stuff like that. So I kind of, it's kind of hard to lump it in because I'm actually in the band and et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, that 80s, 90s kind of like UK thing.
Yeah.
And then, like harmonies, Beach Boy style, a la Everly Brothers, that kind of stuff. So, it's kind of hard to pinpoint it, but I would say it's a good place to start as far as the description goes.
It sounds like a record that I need to have now.
We can make that happen. Yeah, we can absolutely make that happen. Yeah, totally.
So it sounds like you're not just stuck on one style of music. you really have a broad brush you paint with. What started
Absolutely. Yeah.
what's what started it all? Like what made you pick up a guitar?
Well, I come from a musical family. My parents were both musicians, and they were actually in the 60s, in 1965, 66. They were in a group called the Three of Us, my mom, my dad, and one of my dad's college mates from Purdue University, Mickey Clark. So my mom, Marita Foster, my dad, Larry Foster, and Mickey Clark comprised the three of us. And they were signed to, I think it was a subsidiary of Columbia back in the day, but they were signed to Cap Records. And they actually put out, two 7-inches, 65 and 66. And coincidentally, No Count Records is going to reissue those
Ah,
those two 7-inches. We're going to reissue those. The goal is to have the record done by fall, and it's currently being remastered as we speak. I dropped off the sources for the mastering, for the remaster, a couple of weeks ago. Eric and I actually took it up to a mastering studio that we work with a lot here in Seattle. So anyway, the three of us, they're 4 songs. It's 4 songs in total. They will be No Count Records will be re-releasing their singles, which is very personally exciting for me. So yeah, I come from a musical family, but both my parents were never really pushy about it. I think their mindset was more like, well, if he's interested in music, then, we'll support him, we'll be supportive of it. So I just, I mean, both Eric and I kind of naturally just turned out so much, like our parents that, I mean, it was just something that we were both always around. So, I mean, anybody, I guess, logically, they'd be like, oh yeah, they're probably going to be musicians, but yes, we are. So that happened. But yeah, just around music all the time, grew up with it, and had really supportive parents. Don't know what I would have done, without the support that they've given me over the years. So that's the story.
that's very cool. Um, I noticed you have a rack behind you. What's on that rack?
The rack. Well,
The guitar rack.
in this okay, in this particular room, this is like my home studio, which has pretty much become my place of work, due to the whole COVID-19 situation. I also, I co-own with a partner, great guy. I co-own a recording studio in downtown Seattle, or not downtown, more the Capitol Hill neighborhood, called No Count Studios. And we're right in Capitol Hill, and we will be doing a very safe, very limited reopening shortly.
Oh, awesome.
But on the racks back here, for example,
Yeah.
this is my this is my, it's one of my first guitars. It's a beat up, kind of smelly old, that's a 64 Jaguar right there. And like on the back of it, it's upside. Oh no, it's perfect. Yeah. This was for a tribute to Dick Dale that my brother and I did. And so at the end of the set, Eric's guitar says R.I.P. and my guitar says Dick Dale. And so, Eric is always, well, I guess it generally doesn't matter these days, because there's 3 of us that play in the Martians. But the way that it read at the end of the show was, it said R.I.P. Dick Dale. So that's why there's tape on this old guitar here.
Yeah.
But okay, so scanning over here, I don't know. So I'm kind of new at the Zoom thing, but maybe you can see that. But yeah, on the rack over there, I've got, that's a 78 Les Paul. And then I've got a couple, I've got a 50s reissue American Strat. Then I've got a Player's Strat humbucking pickup, which I use with the Sidewalks a lot, actually.
Okay.
And then I've got like a custom kind of like a custom Jazzmaster, like Fat Strat hybrid. It's silver and sparkly, but if I go over there and pick them up, then I'm going to disconnect you from the microphone thing here. So I don't know if I'll do that, but yeah. Okay. So I've got kind of like a custom silver sparkly jazz Fat Strat hybrid guitar. I've got a Mike Lull custom P bass, and then a 50s telly, not a 1950s telly. It's actually like it's like a Fender made in Mexico telly, just called a
Yeah,
50s telly.
yeah.
And but I've got some pickups in that, and sounds great. And I use that one on the road with the Sonics a lot. And then just another made in Mexico Strat with flat wound strings for that mellow jazz sound.
Awesome.
But and then over here I've got a lot of the supply racks that have a lot of the stuff that we use in the studio. Everything from, you know, keyboards and guitar cases, guitar picks, cabling, all that stuff. So got the old supply shelves with all the studio stuff that anybody would need to be in a tiny little room like this and record and track and mix people's records. But yeah, so that's kind of some of the gear going on here. And then you can't see it, but behind me, I've got two more tellies. So love tellies, love Fender guitars, get the job done.
But I do see two beautiful stacks behind you.
Oh, that's actually, so all of our amps, like the touring backline, that like all the, you know, the half stacks, heads, cabs, stuff like that, that's up at No Count Studios, because that's too big to store in this tiny little room. But behind me, actually, let's see here, I'm working on a client's record right now, tracking some guitar. See if I can position that. If you look behind me, you'll see that that's an October 1964 Fender reverb unit, and that's sitting on top of yeah. So that reverb and the head that it's sitting on top of, that's actually, can you see that? Can you see the amp head back there?
Yep.
That's a, yeah, it's like it's about like a, we think like a mid-year 63 Bandmaster. And so I use those for recording a lot. So this is kind of like, you're like in the little crazy with wires and cables control center for my home studio. So anyway, yeah, I'm cutting guitar right now on a client's record, and I happen to be playing through my reverb unit and that 63 Bandmaster, and in a little closet space that you can't see over there, I've got an ISO cabinet, and you know, like an isolation cab. That I've got any number of 12-inch speakers that, you know, depending on the client or depending on the tones or the sound that we need, I'll swap out the speakers. So yeah, so I've got like an early 80s Celestion 12-inch in the cab right now, but at any given time I might swap out, you know, for like a JBL D120F if I was gonna, you know, cut some surf tracks, do some surf guitar, something like that, or, you know, put in a Jensen, something like that. But yeah, it just depends on the sound I'm going for. But the Celestion seems to be working really good for the client's record that I'm working on right now. But what you see behind you, that's just soundproofing. That's like RLX. That's RLX soundproofing. So it's not necessarily a half stack. That would be a pretty tall friggin' half stack, actually. How about that? And it would make it really loud in this tiny little room. But yeah, so that's just soundproofing disguised to look like a half stack. So that's kind of like the little mini. That's the mini tour.
That's awesome. So owning your own studio, you have a lot of different options of the ways to record. I would think, especially for surf music, that using a room for the guitar would add to the dynamics. How do you choose whether to go direct or use a room?
Well, that's a good question, actually. You know, it's kind of like, you know, it's a kind of situation where it really does indeed depend on the sound that you're going for. If, you know, if like a band is in and they're making a record, and, you know, I mean, it all comes down to bleed, you know. So it's kind of like, you know, whatever's bleeding, you know, whatever instrument's bleeding into one mic, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes that can be sometimes it can be a glorious thing. Sometimes it can create some problems. So, you know, if you want to get kind of like a live sound, it's like a nice thing to be able to, you know, control the individual elements as much as you can, but not take away from, you know, that, you know, wide open, you know, hey, we're all playing in a room really loud together kind of, you know, dynamic. So, you know, I think that it's, you know, I generally will not, you know, do like a DI, AKA like, you know, direct inject guitar. and I'll go for as live a thing as I can. But it's nice to be able, for example, to keep like crashing cymbals off of guitar amp mics, because that really kind of limits what you're able to do when you get to the mix stage, that kind of thing. So it's kind of like an even balance, little bleed, hey, that's cool, unless you're going for just like full on wide open mics, and then that puts it on the tracking engineer side, to really make sure that things sound as they need to sound, and you've got the right mic for the right job, right application, and the right spot. And then you can be fine, but it's kind of like go for a balance of both, I guess, when you can, that kind of thing.
Uh, this is a very interesting conversation to me, because I've yet to talk to a studio engineer. So while I have you, I'm gonna pick your brain.
Sure.
Um,
Fire away.
so you have a nice rack of guitars there.
Thank you.
All
Thank
Fenders
you.
and Gibson. Uh, I play Fender myself, so I totally get the Fender vibe. Um, how do you choose uh specifically what sounds better live as to what will sound better on a record or recording? Like, because
It's a good
sometimes we
good
play
question.
different guitars.
It really depends on the application. I can only speak, for myself personally, you know, both as an engineer, I guess, and as a working guitar player. You just try to make, you make a decision on, the right tool for the right application. So, um, like if you're playing live, it depends on which band you're with, but you'll try and, you'll have your sound dialed for your live rig. And then, for example, in the recording environment, you can stretch out a little bit and try different combinations of different things. So, for me, it's a little more of a fluid situation, I guess, where it just depends on what I'm doing, so there's really no one definitive answer to that, I guess. Like, for example, I mean, like there are differences, of course, in what your pickups will do. I mean, you can debate every component of every guitar, until the cows come home, on on what's good and what's not so good, and people do modifications through their gear, all the time. I mean, I tend to keep my stuff fairly stock, but I do get a little picky, with the pickup situation. So like in my touring tellies, I've got like split coil Lindy Fralin telly pickups in them, so like for example, say you get on a noisy stage, you have some dirty power, some weird hum going on, neon lights all around. We all know what that sounds like, when you're
Yeah,
like when you're playing a 3-position strat, I mean, you've got no relief from the from the 60 cycle hum, but
yeah,
uh somebody equipped with humbucking pickups won't deal with that problem quite as much. It'll be a little quieter, so it'll be a less painful experience. But it really comes down to the style of the band, and what the aesthetic is as to far, as to what guitar that I'll choose for something myself personally.
awesome, awesome. Is there some bands that you recorded? Can you talk about some of the bands you've recorded that maybe people have not known that they recorded at No Count, or that they have heard of but didn't know they recorded there?
um Ask me that, hit me with that one again, rephrase that for me.
I'm
I'm
sorry.
not sure I'm not sure I followed. No, it's okay,
Are
it's all right.
who records with you that people might know but didn't make the connection between you and the band?
um well, uh let's see here. Maybe I can kind of like strip that down just a little bit. Um, Most of the people that contact me to record them are familiar with some of the stuff that I've done in my own bands, maybe, or maybe they've heard records, for other bands that I've worked on, that they liked, and so they'll. I'm pretty fortunate. I mean, first of all, I consider myself extremely fortunate every day, especially going through this whole situation over the last, year plus. I've been really lucky to have a lot of work, with clients, stuff like that. So I come from a place of gratitude every day. That being said, I've been fortunate to work with some great bands over the years. So, when you're working with a great band that has their sound down, you just kind of help them realize that on, not on tape, because everything's in Pro Tools for the most part. We are a Pro Tools studio, but we do have 1/2-inch 8-track tape,
Oh,
which has recently been repaired, and it sounds great. The machine sounds great. Anyway, the clients that'll come to me have heard something that I've done or are familiar with, my own work as a, touring musician or a guitar player. So I've been pretty fortunate in that regards, so that people, it's not just like, let's hit the yellow pages or Google, or whatever, and let's find a recording studio. And hey, I'm happy to record those bands too. I got to work. But most of the people that come to me are familiar with the work that I've done in some way. So it's kind of like a little calling card or a reference point or something, I guess. So I've been lucky. I've been fortunate in that regard.
cool, cool. So how close is Seattle to Portland? Do you find there's some sort of scene connection between that people will travel between the two? Does that
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. By all means. I mean, Portland's one of our favorite cities. We love to play Portland. Portland is great. It's fantastic. It's just a great city. So a lot of Portland bands are up here often, and a lot of Seattle bands are down there often. And Sidewalks, Martians, Portland's got so many great bands. Where would I begin? On the surf scene. I mean, you've got like Satan's Pilgrims, of course. Those guys are just legend. But Portland it's interesting. I mean, Portland's always had a collection of excellent artists and excellent bands. Band that we love in the Sidewalks, the Dandy Warhols. Those guys are a Portland band. But I mean, we could be here for hours just naming all the great bands from that city. But yeah, a lot of PDX bands up here, and we play there every chance we get. Seattle bands down there all the time. So there's I think personally there's a really strong connection. So many good venues down there, and so many great like promoters that just love rock and roll. And there's always just like a good vibe, when you go to play there. I mean, you can have a crappy night in Portland and it'd still be better than a mediocre or okay night somewhere else out there, but Portland's great. Yeah, I love it. We love it. We love working there.
What is it about Seattle that there's so much of a melting pot of music? Like what is it about Seattle that does it for you?
Well, that's also a tough one to kind of, encapsulate into a really brief answer. Seattle's just got an incredibly rich, diverse cultural history. And I think that, every element of the culture, the dynamics, and so much, gosh, I mean, you've got so many cultures that, have, as you say, kind of, created this melting pot to pull from. So there's like so much, historical, reference point, and Seattle, Seattle's incredible in that regard, and there are a lot of really amazing artists out here. Some that I think that should be, enormous rock stars, a lot of competition, a lot of bands, playing to the same audience, trying to nail down that same audience. But it's kind of hard to put the finger on it with Seattle. I mean, it's got such a rich cultural history that I think that really informs the art and the music that comes from, this area. And, all right, this is only one small part of it, but I mean, going back to, like Jackson Street, which is a famous, street here in downtown Seattle. I mean, when Quincy Jones lived up here and was doing arrangements and, and playing trumpet, Ray Charles was working in Seattle all the way through. Of course, I mean, you've got like the epic cultural, icons. You've got like Jimi Hendrix and stuff. But one thing that has always been really interesting and super, very, just very attractive to me was the Pacific Northwest during the late 1950s into the, mid late 60s, there were so many killer bands that, were from the Seattle, Tacoma, I guess Western Washington, I mean, Eastern Washington for that matter, but, just around the Seattle, Tacoma-ish area, so many great bands that came out of here in the 60s that, I mean, the Sonics, of course, being one of them, the Wailers, the list goes on, but yeah, the Sonics, fabulous. Wailers, those guys were south of Seattle by all means, Tacoma, Lakewood area, but, up in Seattle too. I mean, there's so many bands, and the records from that time that are from this area there's just a sound to them, there's kind of like that Pacific Northwest sound. And I've always been like really attracted to that. So, a lot of history here.
Yeah, it's very the more and more I talk to people from the Pacific Northwest, the more I find out how rich the music diversity is, I would say.
It's amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Totally. And one thing that was cool, was how much rhythm and blues, how much rhythm and blues and energy was put into the music, being played by these young people at that time in the 60s. It's just kind of like that energy of like, Little Richard, delivered by, sweaty teenagers, obsessed with, rock and roll and rhythm and blues records. It translated a certain way out here, maybe it's in the water, I don't know, but it just translated a certain way. And, there's really kind of like, you can't like pinpoint it down to one band, but there's definitely a Northwest sound going back to that time, and I just love it. So I consider myself very fortunate to, be able to, not during pandemics, but, be able to play live and work around here. It's always been very inspiring. Yeah.
Definitely.
And gonna give a quick shout out. Legendary band from Tacoma called Girl Trouble. They've been around for 35, I think 30, actually 36 years. I am honored to be mixing their first new record in a number of years, in a very long time. So that's one of the great bands from Tacoma, Girl Trouble. Gotta love them. I've loved them since day one. So, and when I thought I knew something about garage rock, and the Martians were just starting to play out in, our first show was February of '92. Everybody was like, yeah, you guys are pretty cool, but you got to check out Girl Trouble. And I was like, who is this Girl Trouble? And I wasn't totally familiar with all the bands that had totally, been playing, garage rock and roll and doing that Northwest sound around here before me, because I was underage. I wasn't legally able to get into the venues that we were playing at that time. I didn't turn 21 until, probably like about a year after we had started playing clubs. So the first time I got to see Girl Trouble, I was absolutely floored. So, nearly 30 years later, I guess. Yeah, nearly 30 years later, I have the distinct honor to be able to mix their first new collection of all original material. So I invite you to check them out on social media, Facebook,
Awesome.
preferably, for updates on that new record. But yeah, everybody's got to. Anybody that hasn't heard Girl Trouble's got to check out Girl Trouble.
I'm definitely going to check them out now.
Tacoma OGs. Yeah, totally.
I totally understand the fact that you could be a fan of something and then years later come back and get the privilege to work with somebody you admire. There's we had our first release by a band called Black Valley Moon. It's a surf band.
Oh, cool.
From Florida. It's Sam from Down by Law, the punk rock band. And
I remember the punk rock band. He's got I remember that band. So he's got a surf band.
Yeah. And wow. I remember in '94 being in the alley behind the Trocadero in Philadelphia, and the guys from Sick of It All came down, and Sam and Hunter were out back, and they were joking around and drinking, and I'm like, man, these guys just played a great show and they're out here having a blast. I'm like, I went up and shook his hand, and you probably didn't remember that, but I remembered it. And here, that was 1994, and almost 30 years later, I'm about to, I put his record out, and so I totally get where you're coming from.
it's something, it's kind of like that whole, I don't know, full circle kind of thing.
Yeah. So what besides the record you just mentioned, what are you working right now personally on for yourself? Because
Um,
you must be keeping busy if you're locked in a studio. I mean, you probably
well,
itching to work.
it is. Let's see here. How to answer that. So the hugest shift in productivity or change or challenges was with the start of the whole pandemic situation, and so it took me a little while to kind of figure out, I mean, because nobody really knew what was going to happen, so for me, I was like, well, this is weird, and how do we do this, and how do we not get sick? So I figured that the best plan would be to, kind of relocate the base of operations into, I've always had like a home-based studio, like a mix room, but just for safety's sake, and being able to stay productive, I figured that I would kind of, replicate my mix environment from the studio into my home studio. Did that. That took some time, and then just made some investment in building out a little more commercially what I'm able to do from the home rig, so that I could get back to work on client records, because I'm, like I said, very blessed or very fortunate in that I've got a pretty good queue of work that I'm slugging away on. So once I kind of got back into production here from this location, client work was the number one priority. So records that I had been working on, like the new Dirty Sidewalks full length, were paused for a little bit while we all kind of readjusted and tried to figure out, how to be productive, how to meet and exceed, my clients' expectations as far as, the quality of the mix work and stuff like that. So it was kind of like, the client work was the number one priority. And then working on my own records was going to have to come, like, well, how can I fit this in, and et cetera, et cetera. However, once we started to kind of get the workflow down, between my brother's home studio, he's got a home track and mix set up as well. So we kind of figured out how to get back into production. And so the Sidewalks released during the pandemic, we released 3 brand new singles. And those were going to comprise like an EP that we were going to do, which was like, just like a vinyl piece for, fans to sell at shows, to have something to sell on Bandcamp. We were going to do we are going to do a 4-song EP, vinyl, which is a collection of these particular singles that we put out. The next single we're working on right now, when we have, when we've got the ability to get together, my brother and I, because we just record each other, cutting vocals, cutting guitar, stuff like that. So, as far as me personally, we're working on the new Sidewalks, finishing what will be the next Sidewalks EP. And then in various stages of completion, we have 6 brand new original Sidewalk songs that'll comprise the next likely EP. I don't know if we'll do a full length for the next thing after the singles collection or not. We haven't decided yet, but we are in motion on it, but it's just going a little slower because it's not really like it was back in the pre-COVID time, where it's like, hey, let's meet at the studio. All right, let's work for 12 hours and just bang it out. That hasn't been really a thing for now a year. So we're just finding new ways to be productive, to be safe, to be productive. So yeah, it's definitely been it has been a mind bomb. It has been a mind trip over the last year. But yeah, so the next new stuff I got going on is going to be Dirty Sidewalks, and then Boss Martians have a lot of stuff planned for late 21, 22, and into 23, which I'm really excited to get into. So can't totally get into the details about it right at the moment, but people will be hearing from the Martian. If anybody interested will be able to hear from the Martians pretty extensively coming up through the next few years. So I am excited to do that. I haven't worked on Martian stuff in a long time. So good for the soul or whatever. But I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to that. Yeah, looking forward to that. So yeah, next up on the horizon, Sidewalks and Martians, as soon as we can get to it.
awesome. You mentioned workflow and adjusting, and that's one thing that I'm interested in is people keeping busy during the pandemic and lockdown. How
Yeah,
how when you have so much that you're working on as an engineer or producer, how do you keep a fresh set of ears? Do you move from project to project, or do you block out certain amount of times for each project?
that is a really good question. Well, so it's been interesting. Uh, One thing that I like about the new workflow, since I've been more, based out of the home studio, has been the fact that like I can throw on some running shoes, I can go outside, and I can like walk a couple of miles and like not listen to anything, just get out in the fresh air, take a walk, let the ears reboot, because your ears will get fatigued, and ear fatigue is not a good thing for making mixed decisions, especially when you're tasked with and entrusted with other people's art. So fresh perspective is a really important thing. And yeah, I've taken a walking, not enough for the 10 plus pounds that I've gained during this whole pandemic situation, which I will be working on, which I am working on now with the walks. But yeah, it's great to be able to just step away from the speakers. And after, a number of years of kind of doing this work, when you're kind of starting to get a little, you know, when things are getting a little, iffy and muddy, you know when to step away. So, I walk and I go outside and just don't listen to anything for a little while. If it's really busy like it is right now, every client deserves the best perspective that you can bring to their project. And so it's good to be able to have like at least 24 hours. I mean, if I'm able to do it, like I try to step away for like a day or two just to, the songs that you've been mixing that you've heard, 500,000 times, you need to try to let those kind of fade away. So when you come into something fresh and rested, with freshly rebooted ears, and you've gotten some rest and you've gotten away from the last record that you just delivered, then you can really just tune in on what's going on. You can really try and just dial in the aesthetic of the band and just get inside the mixes, that kind of thing. So, I mean, perspective is critical. Like, perspective is critical. And, we all, those of us that are my age, I'll remember, like being on an indie label in the 90s, and your label gave you this much money to make the record and you had this much studio time in which to get it done. So we all remember like the 14, 16, 18-hour burnout sessions where
Yeah,
you're tracking and mixing and tracking and mixing, and you would walk away. It would take when you're younger, you can like sleep for a little bit and you're like good to go, but when when you get a little older, you need a little more reboot time. So that being said, the perspective thing, workflow thing, it's been really something I've tried to tune into during this situation. And I have found, working solo, here in this studio, my home mix and now tracking studio, that, the perspective thing, I've learned to really tune in to when I feel like I'm just like, okay, I need to step away, which in the studio environment for me is not, really that much of an option because, if you're on the clock and you've got a client, they've got to get it done. You know, and with that workflow, of course, you take ear breaks and you make sure that you eat and stay hydrated as well. So there's a whole different workflow, when you're on the clock with clients and doing in-person sessions, which I have not done since March of 2020. But at home, I can tell like, hey, I need to step away right now and get a little perspective. So that's been a cool thing, and I've been able to kind of tune into that. Some of the health, some of the psychology and some of the, biological, physical, like some of the physical elements of being an audio engineer. I've been able to tune into that a little bit more when you're not, in the environment of a studio full of people and everybody running around and, doing what they're doing. So it's been a very interesting journey,
Do you
Yeah,
do you
definitely.
do you think now that you're in this kind of environment, you feel like you're working more, uh, taking less breaks, because you're at home? I find that in what I do, I'll work for a couple hours, take a nap, work for a couple hours, take a nap.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure. Totally. Um, it's interesting. So, I'm always busy doing something, that is on a task list of things, to do, to deliver. But the break situation in the workflow of, audio engineering and working from my home studio, I've been able to control that more, which is cool because like I just said, when you get to a point and you're like, my ears are toasted and I should not be making decisions right now, I'm able to kind of hit the pause button and just stop there, step away, whether I need to, whether it's late at night. I try not to work, extensively late, but more often than not, I find myself working pretty late. So it's nice to be able to hit the pause button, go to sleep, get some rest, reboot, rehydrate, have some food, do something like, that normal people do. And then you can jump right back in when you've got a little perspective. So, as far as the workload, I'm generally, I'm fortunate in that, I have a pretty consistent, solid, workload as far as client work goes. So the workload hasn't really changed. It's just kind of how we're doing it, how I'm doing it, I guess, has changed just a little bit.
yeah,
And in that, this is interesting that we're talking this out. It's cool to be able to talk this out with somebody because I can see it a little more clearly now, which is pretty cool.
yeah,
So in that workflow, it's kind of like taking a little more control over like health breaks, I guess, so
yeah,
that's been cool. It's also been cool to, it's nice not to have to commute. That's kind of nice, but I miss working with my clients. I miss that connection. I miss that energy sometimes, like, when you're working with when somebody's on the mic and, it's a pretty close relationship if somebody trusts you to give them feedback on like their vocal, their guitar track or something like that. And, it's really a huge thing for me in doing that work was the outcome. When the outcome was something that, just lifted them up, that feels really good. That feels
yeah,
great.
yeah,
Like
totally.
a singer or, a guitar player, I mean, it's pretty vulnerable work. I mean, people cutting a vocal, somebody cutting a vocal, somebody cutting a guitar track, it's one of those things where, you're really putting yourself out there. So,
Yep,
it's cool to be able to, it's cool to be able to work with people and establish a connection and help, uplift them and help them kind of reach a higher, goal or reality, for their performance. That's a cool thing. That is something that I do miss from working in person with people. I mean, dude, I'm 49 years old and I've been playing, performing live. I don't know. I mean, what, 30 years? This is the longest I've gone, without like live performance, and, I know that there are some people that have done like streaming shows and stuff like that, but I just didn't, I didn't feel like it was the right thing for me or the Martians, especially. The Martians are a hard band to describe. Um, I would say it's best just to come see the band live to kind of get what we're about, I guess. So it's one of those things where, we feed off the energy of the crowd so much that it would feel, to me, it would feel, it would feel a little too different, playing to a camera, I guess, that kind of thing. It's not like, making a music video, but, so I mean, don't get me wrong. I admire and I'm grateful for some of the bands that have live streamed and done shows. It's great to see live performance, but, for me, it just, I don't know, like I get too nervous doing something like that, but yeah, anyway, so, but I do admire the people that have done those live streaming shows. So, yeah, anyway, I ramble on.
no, that was really cool. So
But all right, I do. That's the thing. I do miss a lot of the in-person interaction. But
yeah,
Yeah, just to pick up where I left off on that,
Oh,
I
okay.
do miss a lot of the in-person interaction and working with the clients that, I've been fortunate to work with. So I do miss that. And I miss the crowds, man. I miss Martians people, man, miss that.
Yeah, totally. Um, well, is there anything you'd like to add before we sign off?
No, I think you've got it covered. One thing. Yes, of course. Actually, yeah, of course there's something I'm going to add right now before we sign off. One thing, back to No Count Records, the label that my brother and I, little label that we've got, we have some really cool releases coming up. And one of them is one of our favorite, I guess some people call them a surf band. I think I think that they're more dimensional than that, but the new Tremolo Beer Gut record is
Oh
coming out
yeah.
here in the States next month. And Tremolo Beer Gut is, they're like, when the Martians played with them the first time about 6 years ago in Italy at the Surfer Joe Festival, we were like instantly like, yeah, we love these guys. Like these are like our
Yeah.
kind of guys. And Tremolo Beer Gut leaves it all out there when they play. So great live band. And we are really fortunate to be working in collaboration with Music Recordings, Art Borsome Music Recordings, to be doing the American release of the new Tremolo Beer Gut record. So that's really exciting, and that's been awesome working with those guys. I miss those guys, Yebo and the gang. I miss you guys out there in Copenhagen, in beautiful Denmark. So that comes out next month. So we're looking forward to putting that one out. And No Count also, like I said, we're doing the reissue of the Three of Us singles, but we're also putting out our dad, Larry Foster, our dad's new band, the LD Foster Band. We're putting out the new LD Foster Band EP. So that has 4 songs on that. So we're really excited about that. And I had mentioned Elvis Costello and the Attractions earlier in this. What do they call these Zoom things? Is this like a call or what, like the Zoom call, I guess, whatever it is?
It's a Zoom meeting, but
A Zoom meeting.
it's a podcast.
Yeah. All right. So in this Zoom sesh, I had mentioned Elvis Costello and the Attractions earlier on when we first started, and Elvis's drummer, Pete Thomas from the Attractions, plays drums on my dad's new record.
Wow.
So that has been, aside from working with my dad and my brother, the 3 of us on this record, my brother handles bass, my brother handles most of the bass, bunch of guitar. I played bass on one song and the rest of the guitar, but we're all singing on this record together. So working with the 3 of our voices has been, that's been like, pretty powerful for me. So yeah, so we've got the new LD Foster Band record coming out, and couldn't be more excited to be releasing that stuff. So No Count, we're trying to bring you some good tunes.
It's amazing to me. This conversation that we had is your life is very rich in music, and I think that's a blessing. It's a joy
Yeah,
to hear you
truly.
talk about it.
Yeah, I mean that's why just with all the hardship and ugliness and just this like nightmare that we've all been, every person in the world, it just really shows you how truly human each one of us really are, and how there really truly is a connection. Don't know how I would have made it through this without being able to being fortunate enough or being blessed enough to be able to do what I do. So I've said this to a bunch of people that I've been on calls with recently, and it's just something that I've kind of realized. It's that the term gratitude, humility, gratitude, humanity, these terms have taken on like a whole new meaning for me. So I am truly grateful every day and every single day for the people that I love and that love me, and for the work that I'm able to do.
It's very, very, very cool story, Evan. And
Good stuff.
I want to thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I know we
Got
went.
it.
I know we went
Thank you.
pretty long.
Thank you for reaching out.
I really enjoyed it, and thank you so much. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
You too. Have a great one, Ryan. Pleasure to meet you. And Zoom sesh me anytime here.
Awesome.
Zoom us anytime.